To Knicks Nation on this Tuesday afternoon, another edition of Knicks Fan TV Live, presented by shop.knicksfantv.com. On today's show, this is the Knicks Offseason Guide, and we're going to break everything down: free agency, trade, draft, with ESPN's resident general manager, a longtime friend of the program, Bobby Marks, is in the building, man. Call us up, 657-383-1509, or you can hit us up on the KFTV Discord. And this is a Knicks Fan TV and Bleacher Report simulcast. We'll say hello to our people on Bleacher Report. Bobby, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you, as always.
Absolutely, man. Great to be on with you as well. 09, or you can hit us up. I got to on the KFTV on the Bleacher Report here. There we go. A little technical difficulties. Give me 1 second here. Make sure that I am live on Bleacher Report. Hang on. Make sure we are live. How you doing, man? Okay, there we go. All right, so we are live on Bleacher Report. So as we are going into the NBA Finals here, what's your schedule like? Will you be doing finals coverage? Is it draft for you?
I'm in a little bit of everything. I feel like I've got, it's fun. It's crazy because we're so different than the NFL, where like we've got finals, which would be, basically the equivalent to the Super Bowl. And then we go right into the draft is later this year. It's the 26th and the 27th. And then 3 days later, free agency starts. And then, as you know, summer league, it's like boom, boom, boom. And then we get to mid-July and then we're done. It comes in such a wave that we've got, so many different things we're working on. We've got a draft free agency guide that will come out. We've got like 6 or 7 different free agency type pieces of content that will come out in the near future. We still got to write Dallas and Boston, as far as those offseason guides. Those are the two ones that we haven't really touched, because neither of the teams had been in a position to be eliminated in the playoffs. So yeah, we got a lot going on, but it's a fun time of the year.
Yeah, no question about it. And before we dissect this Knicks offseason, when you think about the season that they've had, the acquisitions that they made, and the run, how do you reflect on this Knicks season?
Yeah, I mean, they just basically, as they basically just ran out of guys. Yeah. That's the reality of it here. And you never want to use injuries as an excuse and stuff. And when we wrote their offseason guide, it gets more challenging. I think it's a little more easier to write teams that are in the lottery, and you're basically, there's 30 different things they need to do in the offseason. I think with New York, it's always about like the great unknown, if what this roster could have been like, right? This roster, a healthy roster, and not even really, Julius and probably Mitch, like just OG, just OG as far as him being healthy. So that's the great unknown. And so all in all, I mean, I think I think it's a different feeling than it was last year when you lost to Miami in the second round. Because I think you kind of got outworked probably in that series, and this is kind of who you are, and how do we change, and what do we add? Listen, I get it. Whenever you lose in the playoffs, there will always be a reaction to, hey, we got to, the continuity thing. It doesn't, and we saw what happened in Atlanta 3 years ago. They stayed pat, and then everybody else lapped them. So I do think you have to be careful here. I think there's a sense that you're happy with how the season went. I think certainly you're not content. I mean, being content is if you get to an NBA Finals and everything. But as you know, there's a lot to dissect here. I mean, it's this isn't Minnesota where like, hey, we've got our starting 5 under contract and we're probably going to roll it back and and we're going to go from here. But when you look at where they are with the draft that's coming up in the next in the next few weeks, I think they're the only playoff team that has multiple ones. And then you look at, certainly a lot of big decisions when it comes to free agency as far as retaining their own and some extension things that we probably need to address here. But I do think they've given themselves an identity. I think the hardest thing that for teams to, search for is an identity, kind of a blueprint, plug and play guys, how guys fit in. So when you're you're going through the draft process and you're going through free agency and you're trying to figure out like who outside of our own works with this group. I think there's a a platform prior post Jan 1, which was the Anunoby trade, that kind of gives you an idea as far as what guys would fit with this group.
Yeah, and they did a good job with that trade in just adding to the chemistry. And you're right, like this postseason, last postseason, it was a frustrating loss, but I understood it, just who Miami was. But this year, it was frustrating, but also I thought it was rewarding in that we kind of see that this team has some real promise, even after losing so many guys, as you said. And it just seemed that with this postseason and looking forward as we dissect this team, like the parity is going to be there in the league where, the dynasties are gone and it's no longer going to be the big three era as we see the Suns struggling with. It's going to be probably the big two and a great supporting cast. And so I think that opens it up for a team like the Knicks where they could legitimately contend.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing, I think depth matters. I mean, it really does. I think certainly they benefit. I think if you're in the Western Conference, it's a bear, right? Like, listen, when you look at teams that weren't in the postseason, whether it be Houston and Memphis, those teams are going to get better. Yeah. And then certainly when you look at San Antonio and in Utah and Portland and some of those other teams that are going to try to get better. I mean, David Griffin, the president of basketball ops in New Orleans, I mean, they win 49 wins, second most in franchise history. They lose in the first round to a good Oklahoma City team, and basically comes out and says, like, the status quo isn't good enough in the Western. I mean, you rarely had seen that before, but I do think there's so much parity. I do think in the East, certainly you have to count on a Milwaukee team that probably will be healthy, right? Yeah, I mean, you just have to do that, but who knows what happens in Miami? Who knows what whatever Philadelphia does with their roster, whether it be cap space, it's still going to take a while if you bring in 7 new players to kind of assimilate. As far as we saw that in 2010 when Miami put that great roster together. Like, it took a while to do that here. So there is there is more of a parity in the Eastern Conference, and I think with New York, it's always about, like, do we bring that back the same group, or do we look to tweak some things? I think sometimes when you tweak some things, you're almost kind of taking a little, you might be able, there's more risk for you to kind of take that step back.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is why it could get a little tricky here. So let's start with, I actually want to start with Brunson, because there was a report earlier in the offseason from Steve Popper, Newsday, who said that Jalen Brunson and his team could potentially look to extend with the Knicks this season at a 4-year, $158 million deal. Now, that would be a major steal for them, considering he made the All-NBA team this year, right? And if he made it again after next season, wouldn't he qualify for the Supermax? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No. So he doesn't qualify at all for Supermax because he signed as a free agent here. So the why the different numbers is so. And this is where kind of it bit New York a little bit here, where they structured his contract and it's a declining number. So basically, it's 140% off his salary for this upcoming season here. So that's why you're limited as far as that 157 number. If he, let's say, says, I'm not going to sign the extension, I'm going to play out next year, and then I'm going to decline my player option here, he'll be eligible to sign for 30% of the salary cap. So that's why you see that bigger number, that I think 5 for like 270. I think for him, I mean, listen, if he comes in at less, at a $34 million number compared to a $46 million number, it's a huge boost to New York as far as what they're able to do. I think there's another crack at the apple for him, so he could come in and say, you know what, I'm going to do a 3-year extension, and in the third year it's going to be a player option. And then I'm going to put myself back into free agency, 3 or 4 years from now, and maybe make, if I'm still playing at a higher level, be able to make up whatever I lost there. So it's hard. This. I mean, like when we see this all the time in rookie extensions, when people put $158 million in front of you, like that's hard to turn down. I don't care if you've got 270 waiting for you from a year from now. A lot can happen in that. So that's what, that's what Jalen's going to have to figure out. And that's what his reps are going to have to figure out as far as, is there a way to, maybe, get a little bit of a pay increase for that 25-26 season, but then give myself some flexibility where I can decline that option and then go back into, into free agency, 2 or 3 years from now.
That's interesting. So take a little bit now and then look to cash out a little bit later. That would be an interesting move. Now, in the lens of the first apron.
Yeah.
Just pulling up your graphic here. Nicely done here. First apron is at $178.7 million. So, let's say hypothetically Brunson did make that deal this year. How would that impact the Knicks in terms of future moves that they could make?
Yeah, so this year, no impact at all because he's still on the contract that he signed a few years ago when he came over from Dallas. It impacts starting next year. And I think what you're going to see is there's going to be some revenue growth here as far as how the salary cap grows. And I think New York's in this position, as well as a lot of teams, where the cap this upcoming offseason, is only going to grow about 3.7%. So you're kind of like in this little bit of financial crunch this year, but eventually it's going to get better. It's going to get better in 25, 26. You'll see a 10% growth likely. The new TV deal was going to come through. So it will get better there. It will give you more, flexibility as far as how you can build out your roster. But if he signed the extension this offseason, that first year of it would start next year.
Next year, yeah. So then, are you finished that point, or you just want to take a quick water break?
Nope, that's all I got for you.
so then, let's say, I'm just thinking in terms of if he signed the deal now,
yeah,
would they still be pressed to make that improvement to the team this year? In terms of just being leery of the apron.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you'll see is that you almost have kind of like a 1-year financial window if you're going to make big changes this offseason, especially if a Brunson number goes from whatever 24.9 million to, let's say, next year. If he did an extension, now all of a sudden that's at, $35 million. So you're taking on more money here. As I said, the good thing is that the apron will grow. The first and second apron will increase, over the next year here, starting next year.
Now with Julius Randle, what do you think about Randle's prospects and an early extension with his team? He also has a team option for 24-25.
Yeah, it's a big the extension number is a big number. I mean, I think it's 3 for 181, which is a huge number for a player. So that certainly missed the post I think starting in February, the end of the year, did not play in the playoffs here. I think it's hard for you to commit to an extension at that number. He's got basically a $31 million player option for 25-26. I think it's hard for you to commit to that and increase it over the life of the contract here, where you're paying, let's say Julius, $40 million plus over the next 3 or 4 years. I think that's a big ask for New York to do.
So do you think they let it go into free agency and play this year out as kind of a prove it year?
I think you have to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, because there's no guarantee him going into next year saying, you know what, I'm going to be a free agent. I'm going to decline that $31 million, that $31 million player option here. I think if there's something for you to, and this is the one thing that New York has really been good at, is how they've structured their books. You have no player on the roster making more than $30 million. And I think that's going to probably change soon. It'll probably change with Anunoby this offseason. It will change with Brunson if he does an extension next year, maybe even with Randle here. But I do think you kind of get an idea. Listen, if he's looking for the full, if he's looking for, 3 for, let's say 161 or 171, the extension number, I think that's a too rich of a contract for you to entertain.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with that one. In terms of Anunoby, they're saying Philadelphia could be a player here. I mean, what do you think the odds are that he's not a Knick when free agency starts on June 30th?
I would be stunned.
Yeah.
I really would, unless New York comes in and the number is significantly lower than what he's looking for. Really, I think Philadelphia is really the only team that would be in play for him when you look at teams like Oklahoma City and Orlando, teams that have certainly significant cap space, playoff teams, and then you look at Utah and Detroit certainly has a lot of money to go out and spend here. I think it's a matter of kind of coming together as far as what the comfort level is, as far as a long-term deal, as far as what your per value number is. I think there's the concern, the durability where he's played on an average of, I think 50 games over the last 4 years. I think you have to take that into consideration. But when you made the deal at the end of December, you did that with the mindset that he was going to be part long term, or you weren't going to do that. And I think you had to have an idea as far as what that number was going to be when he did become a free agent.
Yeah, absolutely right. I just can't see them letting him walk out the door after making a big trade like that. He means way too much to the team. And so going to be interesting to see what that number comes in at, because do you think, is it closer to the 40 side, or is it closer to the 30 side? What do you think?
I think you're probably somewhere in between. I think you're probably in that 34 to 35 number. I think you'd love to get it close.
Oh, did we lose Bobby Marks?
So I think, I think if you're looking at a 4 for 140 type number, I think that's probably, it's a little bit different than doing 5 for 245. That's, I mean, when he made the trade, everyone said, oh, he's a max guy and this is kind of where you are. I think you're probably in that. I think you're still in that 33 to $34 million range.
CB the Franchise, Bobby Marks here on the ones and twos, the Knicks off-season guide. If you guys have questions for Bobby, call us up 657-383-1509, or you can hit us up on the KFTV Discord. Another major factor here for the Knicks, Bobby, is Isaiah Hartenstein. Hartenstein did sign a 2-year deal with the Knicks 2 years ago at roughly like $8 million. Now, the max they can offer him, 4 years, 72. Just explain real quick the early bird right situation here and why they can't offer him anymore.
Yeah, so he's different than OG. So OG has bird rights. So bird rights gives you the ability to exceed the salary cap, and it gives you the ability to sign a player up to 5 years. So OG can, if he declines his option, he can sign for up to 30% of the salary cap. Basically, his bird rights have transferred with him from Toronto. He signed a rookie contract, he extended, and then those rights were when he got traded, those transfer with him. With Isaiah is different because he signed a 2-year deal. If he had signed a 3-year deal and let's say he'd become a free agent next year, then he would have full bird rights. So bird rights is 3 years. Early bird rights is 2 years. So you're limited as far as how much of a first year starting number could be, whether it be 175% off his, this past year, or the average player salary. Average player salary is, like $12.9 million. It's kind of like what Austin Reeves went through last year. So that's why you're seeing it capped at a certain number, at 4 for $72.5 million. The hard thing is that the early bird has to be for a minimum of 2 years as far as what the next contract would be. So it's not like he can go out there and sign a 2-year deal and with a player option for the second year and say, you know what, I'm going to establish my bird rights next year, right? I'm going to do a 1+1, and then I'm going to be a free agent next year. And then I'm going to be, because I'll have 3 years with New York here. You can't go out and do that by using early bird. So it's got to be a minimum of 2 years. The challenge now becomes as far as if a team like Detroit all of a sudden comes in and says, we're going to give you 4 for 100.
Yeah.
Now he's going to have to make a decision, right? Or if Oklahoma City comes in and says, you know what, we think you would fit perfectly next to Chet. Here's 4 for 80. Do I think so? Probably not. It's not in their style, how they go about doing things. But you're limited as far as, how much money you can go out and offer him. And, it's funny, like all these, his contract turned out to be a great value, right?
Yeah.
Eventually value turns into something else, and then you're kind of limited as far as what you can do.
I do wonder with OKC. I look at them as the biggest threat in terms of them looking for a 5. Now people are questioning it. Would Presti spend that amount of money on a player like an Hart? What do you think about that?
You know what when you study Oklahoma City, it's not, and it's not kind of how they've gone about business. Now, does that mean that things change? It could. I think when you look at them, and they're sitting around $33 million in room. They've got a 2-year financial window before, next offseason, Chet and Jalen Williams are extension eligible. Then the following year, Shea is extension eligible. So all of a sudden, these costs start to add up. When you look at how they put together their roster, they don't go out and sign free agents. That's not their nature. They went out and signed Bismack Biyombo and Mike Muscala minimums. Even Lou Dort, who's on this $17-18 million contract, he was an undrafted free agent. Isaiah Joe was a, undrafted, Philly had waived him, undrafted guy. I think for them, it's kind of like, they've got so much draft equity. Where do we find someone in the trade market? Like Jared Allen, for example, for me, like that would make more sense, where you get 2 years left on Allen's contract instead of maybe committing 4 for, $24-25 million. But you never know. I mean, listen, they when you get to a second round like Oklahoma City did, and it was a competitive second round, you might think, how we've gone about business before, maybe we have to change our thinking as far as become more active in free agency.
So let's say, because I do think Hart will be back with the Knicks. I just think it makes a lot of sense. He's got chemistry with those guys, and they need him. So I hope that they take care of him. But then where does that leave Mitchell Robinson and his future with the Knicks? I mean, Mitch is my guy. He's the elder statesman, longest tenured Knick on the team. A good story, but with the injuries, you just can't rely on him. You can pencil him in to miss time every single year. How do they invest in him as a starting 5, knowing that he's not going to be there at critical times for them?
It's a great point, and I think that's why Isaiah becomes a priority. I mean, we haven't even talked about Precious too, who's a restricted free agent. When you dissect these new rules in this collective bargaining agreement, it always was that when you were doing a deal, you're signing a player, it was always about the luxury tax, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and it was really just a matter of like ownership, right? So if we're under the old CBA but with this current team, this offseason right now, so let's say the 2017, it would be like Leon just going to James Dolan saying, hey, we're going to go into luxury taxes. How much does it cost us? Now, how these rules are, these apron rules, first and second apron. I feel like I'm like a weatherman saying like, there's a hurricane coming. Like I'm telling everyone, and everyone's like, no, it's not going to hit shore. And I'm like, no, it's going to hit shore. Now it's like, okay, we want to keep OG. We want to keep Isaiah. Can we do it? Can we do it and go into the apron? Or can we do it and now all of a sudden it requires us to move Mitch, and maybe you have to attach something to it, or maybe you have to shed. Maybe we have to do something with Bojan, because what happens is, let's just play devil's advocate and say like, the roster stays intact. Okay. The only 2 guys, you add your 2 picks. You don't bring back Precious, and you don't bring back Alec Burks and Shake Milton, those guys, but you bring back OG and you bring back Isaiah, and let's say their salaries are combined $52 million next year. And we want to keep Bojan. We're guarantee his contract at the end of June. I think it's the 28th of June. And we're going to keep Mitchell. You're in the second apron. Like you're in the second apron. You're not a luxury tax team. You're in the second apron.
So just to confirm this, let's say Isaiah and OG get the deals we think they're gonna get.
Yeah.
The Knicks are now in second apron territory. You haven't even extended Brunson, haven't even extended Randle yet. You're in second apron.
You're in second apron this year.
Wow.
You're in it.
Wow. Now,
so that's keeping Bojan.
That's keeping Bojan. That's guaranteeing the Bojan contract. Now, would that prohibit the Knicks? Would those second apron restrictions be in place over the course of this season coming up, or would it be the 24-25? I mean, the following.
Starting July 1.
Wow.
So you could get. Listen, we could be in summer league on July 15th, and you might say to me like, man, we got $194 million in salary, and we're $5 million over the second apron. What does that mean to us? Well, here comes the restrictions now, right? So this is what teams like Minnesota are facing, where you have the inability to take back more money in a trade. The inability to, so basically what happens when you're in the apron, it basically eliminates all these different resources that you have to build out your roster. If the next disgruntled all-star became available, if Giannis became available, I'm just hypothetically throwing this out, where you can't take back more money in a trade. You can't aggregate contracts. Those trade exceptions that you have, I think New York has 3 trade exceptions. Those are no longer available. Some of the other rules, using your tax mid-level doesn't become available. Your draft, if you finish in the second apron after the 24-25 season, your draft pick in 2032 becomes frozen. You can't trade that in a deal here. Yes, you have a lot of other draft equity that you've built here, but it just makes it extremely, extremely difficult as far as how you can add to your roster outside of your own players here. And we saw, Josh Kroenke, who's, certainly his dad is the owner of the Denver Nuggets, came out and said, like, listen, we built that roster in Denver under a different collective bargaining agreement. So it just makes it more challenging if New York, if that $50 million player became available and you're in the second apron, and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what, we got the salary to do it. We could do Julius and Josh Hart. It's 46 and 50. That gets you within there. No, you can't, because you can't aggregate those two contracts, and now you can't take back more money in the deal.
Wow.
So that's why it used to be, as I said, like, it used to be just going to James Dolan saying, hey, it's going to cost us another $30 million in luxury tax. There was never those other layers of these restrictions that teams are going to be faced with here. And that's why it makes, the decision, you traded for Bojan. He can help you. He can give you depth. But it's like almost like teams are saying, you know what? You have too many toys. Instead of having 8 toys where you're going to have 5 now, you got to give 3 of those back.
Right.
Or you can keep your depth, but it's going to cost you as far as how you're going to be able to maybe add something else to you. But yeah, those are, I think the Mitchell Robinson with 2 years left on his contract, certainly from a health standpoint, if you sign Isaiah, you comfortable committing $32 million to your 2 centers. I mean, those are some hard decisions that they're going to be faced with here.
Wow. And so, I mean, that pretty much means that this is going to be a critical offseason here.
Oh, and they're not the only ones. So don't think you're like, but here, this is why they're different though than other teams though, is that you've got your draft equity, right? You got 2 picks, you got 3 picks, you got 2 in the first, 24 and 25. Okay. Young, inexpensive talent. You've got you've got all your own first round picks. You got draft picks from other teams here. So even if, let's say, you did go into that apron, you're not where Phoenix is. Okay. You're not where Milwaukee is, where you're basically relying on roster spots 6 to 15 on guys signed to the veteran minimum contract. And you're continually churning it out, and you don't have any draft equity to either draft a player or to maybe use in a deal here.
Good point. And there are rumors that they're trying to package 24 and 25. I do hope that they intend to keep a pick. I think they should get I'm looking for a upperclassman, someone who can come in and contribute, a la Peyton Watson or Christian Brown, like for Denver. But I would certainly would behoove them to just keep one rookie roster spot than two. Then, right?
I think so. I mean, I think when you look at, certainly that, you basically have, three or four free agents here. I think, and then you have certainly a pick in the second that maybe goes to a two, maybe that's a two-way guy, maybe, do you want to maybe move one out and then, do you recruit maybe, 2 or 3 seconds down the road, but I do think, I would be surprised if we get to, by midnight on June 26th, the first night of the draft, New York doesn't at least have one player. And I think, I think you can, I think you can find value similar to what Miami did last year, with Golden State did last year, where you can get guys that were, 3 or 4 year, guys, a guy that we saw out at the combine, a kid named AJ Mitchell from UC Santa Barbara, who's a 3 year guy, 6'4" guard, tough as nails, kind of fits Tibbs as far as a defensive mentality, can play point guard for you. Guys like that fit. It's not, he probably is not an all-star 4 years from now, but I think he could probably become a complimentary role player. And what happens is that where free agency is, this is not the greatest free agent class outside of certainly what their own, as far as dealing with your own free agents. And this is probably, this is how they're going to be able to add to their roster outside of, of keeping their own.
CP the franchise, Bobby Marks here, the Knicks Offseason Guide. We are live on KnicksFanTV and Bleacher Report and Facebook and Twitter. So salute to everybody watching wherever you guys are at. For my guys on the lunchtime grind, throw a hashtag grind in the chat and let us know that you're in here watching instead of working, man. You're doing the right thing. Okay. Rokas Jokubaitis, draft and stash pick. There's rumors that he wants to come and play for the NBA. Is there any additional salary cap implications when you sign a player who in that draft and stash scenario?
Yeah. So guys, if you draft a player in the second round, teams have what we call a second round pick exception that you don't have to take from one of your exceptions. So let's just say New York is a second apron team or a first apron. And then all of a sudden, like some of these exceptions that you would have had, last year you signed Dante to most of your non-taxman level. You don't need to dip into that. So if you have a player that you draft and stashed and he's a second round pick, or if you draft a player in the second round, every team, no matter where you are financially, you have this second round pick exception, which can be anywhere from a 3 year, at a minimum, a 3 year contract, team option the last year, or a 4 year contract, team option in the fourth year. And it's basically a minimum type deal.
Got it. So Bojan Bogdanovic, another name. We talked about his contract. The guarantee date, I think, is before the draft.
It's right after. I think
right
it's
after.
the 28th. I think it's the 28th.
Okay.
3 days prior to the start of the salary cap year. So you're looking right around the 28th on there. And there's $2 million. $2 million out of the $19 million is guaranteed. The hard part is, when you look at it, well, people are saying, and I saw a lot of people commenting, hey, maybe he's a trade asset. Maybe you could trade it.
Yeah.
Well, when you trade a player that's only got whatever, either zero amount guaranteed or partial, the partial amount counts. It's not the $19 million number. It's the $2 million number that's going out as far as how. So if you wanted to go out and trade Bojan for a $19 million player, well, you're basically going to have to guarantee his full salary. It's similar to what we saw last year when Chris Paul gets traded to
Golden State.
Phoenix. He goes from Phoenix to the Wizards in the Bradley Beal trade, and he had like $15 million guaranteed. They guarantee the full amount to match the whatever else went, the Landry Shamet went to match the Beal number here. So I think with Bojan, I think you have to, as we said, like that's a decision that you're going to have to make, right? Like as far as did you just see him kind of, as a 1 year rental? Do you want to maybe flip him? Do you maybe want to keep him? and maybe maybe flip him down the road here. Maybe that's who you think your depth is, and you're content as far as where you are financially.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, do they consider another 1+1 to have that flexibility, to have the contract that's then tradable, or maybe do they look to package a Bojan, a Mitch, and maybe some picks to? Because what I'm thinking is, I know everybody every summer it's like, okay, star trade, but is it another triple rather than a home run grand slam? Like, is it another OG Anunoby type of trade? What the Celtics made with Derek White or with Porzingis. Like, is it another move like that where they figure they can bring in a guy mid-level salary, but that can still help move the needle for this team into contending status?
I mean, I think that's realistically probably where you're looking at. First of all, that and maybe it's going to happen in the next 3 weeks. Like, who's the stars that would actually be available, right? Like, who actually is a guy that's, that's the hard thing. Like, maybe we'll hear Karl Anthony Towns' name.
No, I don't want to hear that.
But here's the thing. Like, so here 5 years ago, thoughts like that. Yeah, I get it. But are you content taking back 4 for 221 and a guy making $50 million?
No way.
That hamstrings you as far as what you're able to do. But when you look at, when you're swapping a $19 million guy for a $17 million guy, and it's a guy that, either, as they call them, guys that can come in, if you're a baseball pitcher, come in the 6th and 7th inning and gobble up innings for you, or a specialist that you maybe, might need. I think that's the more the direction that you go in. And I think it's hard building rosters in this day and age with 3 guys making $40 million.
Yeah.
And then basically it's like, where your depth is. And we see it. We see it in the Dallas series. You can have 2 guys. You can have Kyrie and Luka, making, top dollar. But then, man, you need PJ Washington. You need Daniel Gafford. You need Derek Lively. You need Jaden Hardy. You need guys like that. That depth that teams would not have if you're top heavy in salary.
Yeah, and that's the word I used. An innings eater, I think, is something that the Knicks could use, especially off of the bench. Well, what do you think about Dejounte Murray? And where Landry Fields and the Hawks may go there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the guy, people always say, you get Trae Young and you've got Dejounte, who's got more value. And I think for me, it's Murray, just because of where his contract is. He's going into year 1 of that 4 for 114 that he signed last offseason. It's basically $20 million less than what Trae Young is per year. So that's an interesting name. I think the other thing too, when we're going back to these apron rules, is that where New York is right now, and they're not an apron team, right? You finished 23-24 season. However, if they go out and use one of these trade exceptions that they have, or if they go out and they send cash in a deal at the draft, and if they go out and make a deal on June 20th, and they take back more money, those aprons now get triggered. They are now hard capped for next year. So even though they're not in it right now, you're looking ahead to the starting on July 1 based on what happens in the next 3 weeks here, that those will trigger the hard cap if they go out and use one of those resources going forward. So then that makes your decisions a lot harder, right? As far as what you can do. But I think the Murray name is a really good name. I think Atlanta will be active as far as, certainly with both guys there.
CP the Franchise, Bobby Marks here. We're going to take a couple quick questions and then wrap up. Great show so far. Book from Queens. Quick, Book, go ahead and unmute your mic.
Hey, fellas, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Bobby, great to have you. CP, great to see you as always. So quick question. So if the Knicks did have to make a big move, do they have to make it this offseason, or is there a way they can make it going forward?
I appreciate the call.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit easier this offseason, as we said, just because the Brunson number is going to get bigger.
Yeah.
I think certainly whether it be in an extension or if he decides to play out, not do an extension and sign for 5 for 270, which he could next year. So now you're going from as I said, a $24 million contract to a $46 million contract. So it does give you more the flexibility to do a deal. I think it's a matter of when we talk about 1 year window, that 1 year window might not be there is if you elect to keep basically everyone intact.
Yeah.
So there might be more optionality next offseason. So making a big deal, I think it's just a matter of kind of where you are with the apron, right? Like, big deals go away where you are based on where you are with these new rules and everything.
Femme from Brooklyn. Femme, go ahead and unmute your mic. Rapid fire. Femme going once. All right, Femme, looks like you got to reset your Discord. I'm going to drop you off the Discord. Go ahead and reset and try it again. 646. What's your name? Where are you calling in from?
Ty from office, still hiding under the desk, baby.
All right. All right, Ty Clemens. He's at work, but he needs a question. All right, hurry up. Let's go.
Real quick, I just want to know, would the fans finally respect Dolan if he paid that luxury tax and keep the team intact?
Well, fans will respect a contender. So,
listen, the luxury tax is not the issue.
Right.
James Dolan would go into luxury tax. All these owners would go into luxury tax to put a championship team out there. The luxury tax, as I said, is basically replaced by these restrictions. Do you want your pick frozen in 2032? Do you want the inability to go out and make an all-star type trade? That's the questions that the front office and ownership will come to the realization as far as what they need to answer. It's not about going into luxury tax by $6 million and paying a $13 million penalty. It's not about that anymore. Like that's from in the old CBA.
Right.
It's about the restrictions that will come when you've got some high salary here.
So it's not just the financial implications. Now it's operational. Now it's hitting you in how you maneuver. That's different. We've never seen that. Femme from Brooklyn. Femme, go ahead and unmute your mic.
Yo, am I coming through?
Now you're coming through. Let's go.
Shout out to the show, KFTV. Hit that like button. Shout out Bobby Marks, #1 show for the fans by the fans.
Thank you, man.
Yo, so I got 3 quick questions. Alec Burks, can we sign and trade him? Is that a thing? Number 2, when you guys are talking about Bogdanovich, you got my head spinning. I'm definitely going to watch this whole show over again so I can understand. I'm definitely going to watch it again. But with Bogdanovich, I kind of don't even want to keep him on the team because I was looking at him as being great salary filler for a trade. But if he puts us in the second round, in the second apron, we can't aggregate his salary. I feel like he's not even worth another $19 million player next year. I'd really, really love to aggregate that salary. But then the third question, is there any way we can keep Precious on this team? I thought he did a great job filling in during the regular season, not so much during the playoffs, but we need someone as a contingency when Julius is out. If OG is out, I'd really love to keep Precious on this team. And last thing, Bobby, can you say a couple words about your colleague, Monica McNutt, excoriating Stephen A. Smith? Thank you.
I appreciate the call, man.
Man, that's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna leave the last question. I'll just give a laugh about the last question there. Yeah. So I will. I'm a bystander to all this here, right? Regarding Precious, I believe that the likelihood is that New York will tender him a qualifying offer, and then he becomes a restricted free agent, and then you figure out as far as what the market will be.
Right,
There's no, I think that at the very least that will happen, and we'll see if he can get an offer sheet, or maybe the New York figures out a way to retain him, because I do think there's a priority with him as far as from his versatility and be able to kind of give you insurance coming off your bench. I think with Burks, you can, when you do a sign and trade, it has to be with the consent of the player. I think he's got bird rights. Yeah. Sign and trades are a little more challenging because it's got to be a minimum of 3 years on the contract. The first year's got to be guaranteed. So that's the team that's, but then if you're doing a sign and trade, then you're adding more salary to it. Yeah. So now you got more salary coming in. Yeah. And then as far as with, when he mentioned kind of with Bojan here, yeah, I mean, that's the downside. You keep him, then you're not going to be able to, you can't take that contract and put him with a $15 million player and get $34 million in salary. That's what you're seeing in Phoenix. Phoenix can't go out and trade Josef Nurkic and Nasir Little and take back a $25 million player. Like the aggregate rules are so punitive.
Wow. A lot of work to do for Leon Rose and company, man. But Bobby, we definitely appreciate the time here. Great job. Just really going into a deep dive on this Knicks offseason guide. We are going to reconvene in Las Vegas at the Sports Business Classroom. You want to just give the people a little bit about the program?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of, something for me. This is something new as far as to kind of be the lead instructor here. But we've got, I think we only have a few spots open, but it's in Las Vegas from the 14th of July to the 20th. It coincides with Summer League. We have everything and anything as far as how you want to learn about the business of basketball, whether it be agent negotiations. You're involved. I think you're going to be terrific as far as building your brand. People want to get into sports. And sometimes it's not always about working for a front office, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's building a media brand for a team that you grew up rooting. But now there's an arm to that. But we have, it's basically a college-like environment where you go through, 6 or 7 sessions per day for the whole week. Salary cap, media and broadcasting, scouting, analytics. It's going to be fun. We've got about 125 people that will come out and take the class there. But we've got a wide range of instructors, and we've got NBA people. We've got people from the league, Players Association. It's a good week for Sports Business Classroom.
Looking forward to it, and hopefully by that time, most of the offseason transactions.
I hope so.
That's
the benefit of Summer League being a little bit later this year.
Yeah,
that we're not in like mad scramble mode. That like maybe it's like kind of like we get to July 14th, and everything's done already.
Right.
So I would hope so.
Hopefully, man. And then if so, we can break it down in studio there in Las Vegas, man. But for now, thanks again, Bobby, for the time, and have a great day, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the great Bobby Marks. Salute to everybody in the chat once again, man. Hit that thumbs up button for you boys. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, hit the thumbs up button. If you're on Bleacher Report, hit the fire emoji. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, man. This was a great show. I thought it was very informative, very instructive. King Deej, this was very educational. This is what we do at KnicksFanTV, man. This is what we do. We educate, we inspire, we have a good time, and I hope you guys got a lot out of it. My guys on Bleacher Report, RO03, I see you. Wooly, appreciate it. Cameron Glenn throws a fire emoji up. LK8 Bong 8, appreciate it. Wooly says this is about fit, not talent. I think it's a little bit of both. Until we figure out what we have here in Julius Randle, I'm talking about postseason, then it could be. We just don't know. But for now, this was a great season by the Knicks. Lawrence Peters, my franchise channel members on here. Salute, man. Johnny4481, salute. I don't know what happened to my camera, man. My camera just glitched out. I had to go to the backup generator again. But you guys that have been watching this show know that's what we do, man. When things go out, we just go to the backup plan. And either way, the show must go on. DJ Edsy, salute, man. Salute to DJ Edsy. I hope you got your merch over there in the UK. Shout out to Edsy. And if you haven't already, go ahead and get your merch, man. Shop.KnicksFanTV.com. Make sure you go get that. Absolutely. Big off season ahead, man. Chip said CP got real concerned when he mentioned the second apron. Yo, it's real. It's real, man. These next few moves, you gotta be confident that this is the team, because it's gonna get not impossible, but it's gonna get much harder to put a chip team out there once you make your investments. Harlem's Alfredo, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you. Who else on Facebook? Ty Clemens saying thanks for calling in. Shout out my people on Facebook. So to everybody that called in on the lunch break. What else? Order of business. So this was a show with Bobby Marks. Salute to the replay gang if you guys are catching up on the replay. If not, you can also hear us on the call. Put it on the podcast. This will be available in audio podcast format. Thursday on the NBA Report. Tomorrow, Wednesday on the NBA Report, the great Derek Harper will join us, man. We're going to talk about the Dallas Mavericks and their run to the finals, and we're going to get Harp's thoughts on the Knicks as well. I try to get some Knick talk going on the NBA Report as well with our distinguished guest. Earlier this morning, I had Howard Beck from The Ringer preview the finals. We had a great show there. And then this Thursday, starting game 1 all the way to the end of the finals, CP the franchise, Kmart, Kenyon Martin on the 1s and 2s, NBA Finals post-game live on the NBA Report. Make sure you guys are there after every game, man. Highlights, analysis, caller reactions. Call in, talk to Kmart, talk to an NBA veteran who's been in there in the trenches and get his thoughts on things, man. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. Let me make sure I have not missed any super chats. To my chat said people still use Facebook. Yeah, you'd be surprised, man. So to my 2 cents, checking in from, I think France, my 2 cents. Salute CP Bobby. Does a second apron challenge make it more attractive to make a bold move this summer before you are in a spot to make it harder? Yeah, I think based on, our conversation here with Bobby, I think the answer is yes. Think the answer is yes. The time to make a splash is now. G5 Weez, appreciate it. Shavor TV, iHeart is a must. Absolutely. Yeah, I gotta do some more testing with this camera, man. My camera's been glitching out on me, man. Triple M, this episode changed my mind. We can't afford iHeart. Who else we got here, man? Salute to my Bleacher Report people. Nick at night. Julius is staying. Bring back the core. I'm with it. Ooh, Helen Saddles. Get rid of Julius. Damn. CJ Billions on the Bleacher Report says, get rid of, just get me McCall. Like I told you guys on yesterday's show, I don't see the Mikal Bridges thing happening. How are we getting Mikal Bridges here? How do we plan on getting Mikal Bridges here? So to everybody on the Bleacher Report Twitter. If you guys are on Bleacher Report, make sure you guys follow us at KnicksFanTV on all platforms. Daniel Bolsajor, this episode brought realism to the chat. Yeah. We ain't dreaming no more. It's time to get real now. Now the work begins. Contracts and expectations. Contracts and expectations. Eric Horn says, see you in Vegas. I signed up. Okay, Eric, we'll see you there. Yeah, man. Sports Business Classroom. Going to be a great week in Vegas. I'll be teaching out there on the media and broadcasting side along with Howard Beck, J.A. Adonde, Nikias is going to be there, Steve Jones. So we got a good group. Definitely got a good group, man. Seth Partnow will be there as well. There's going to be a good group. On the Bleacher Report side, I think I'm back on the 19th. Let me just double check and make sure I know when I'm there on the Bleacher Report side. I think I'm back on the 19th. And KFTV, we're rocking all day, every day, man. We got to get the lunchtime grind. Bleacher Report, I'll be back on the 19th and also on the 29th. So make sure you guys put that on your calendar, same time. And then KFTV, we will keep it rocking with you guys, man. Beautiful day here in New York. About to get to the grind. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember, like, share, subscribe, share these videos, man. The number one show for the fans, by the fans. I don't care if it's Knicks. I don't care if it's NBA. We get it. Let's go. Thanks everybody for tuning in, man. We'll see you guys tomorrow on the NBA Report. CB the franchise, Derek Harper. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks again to Bobby Marks. Thanks again to Howard Beck for today's shows. Peace.